Hi, welcome to this episode of Hollywood Breaks. This is episode 45, and Keith and I discuss all the great things happening behind the scenes. This week, we're particularly interested in this box office success of Fast and Furious 9. Is this really the benchmark that we're talking about of the new theatrical release? Or are there some more metrics that we should be looking at and discussing? And we also discussed the idea of the filmmakers need to dialogue with its audience and not be canceled out. So these and other concerns we're discussing right here on Hollywood Breaks. I'm looking forward to this weekend. I think the big long holiday weekend is going to be a good weekend for the movies. Especially, here's my theory, right? Is that 4th of July is on Sunday, so people have Monday off and nothing to do. And in most of the United States, well, maybe I'm biased, but most of the United States seems very hot. So people need to be inside. So I'm excited for the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm not as bullish on it as you are. So we can talk a little bit about Fast and Furious 9, which,
sure.
Okay. So 70 million is not bad. That's good given the context of we're in, and any sort of news where more people are starting to go back to the theater, I think is a great thing. But what I worry about is a lot similar to what Richard Rushfield has brought up in a lot of his anklers, that these fundamental issues of the industry in general are just going to get ignored because everyone's just going to be so excited that cinema is back, baby, that they're going to forget that there are core issues that still exist. Now, granted, I'm fully willing to admit this is not an apples to apples comparison. So if you go back to the last Fast and Furious, not Hobbs and Shaw, which is sort of the interim sort of Fast and Furious presents, it was in that universe, but it wasn't really a Fast and Furious movie per se.
That's right. Yeah.
That was like in 2018, I think, or 17 was the last Fast and Furious 8. That opened to like, I think 97 million. So here we are, 3 days, 70 million. So granted, I don't have all the details in front of me, but
this is also like number 9. You have to know that there's some, come on, you know what I mean? And also, I mean, I tried to take my kids to the movie last week, but there's like, that was the only thing playing maybe. Mm-hmm. So I think the big releases haven't come out yet. And I think that's, I it's not that I disagree with you. I think there's some credit to be given to the fact of like the pandemic, like in a lot of places, has showed the weakness of this part of the industry. And there are things that we've not been addressing very well. The OTT platforms have taken over, as we talk about all the time. The big shift has happened. And the habits of the consumer have changed along the way. And we have to know that and address that. But I also don't know if we've had any true tests yet, right? We have Tenet, which we knew, they tried early, that didn't work out. Wonder Woman 1984, which should have just taken another year to finish the film instead of doing whatever that release was.
Yeah.
And then we have these kind of like warm startups, Fast and Furious number 9, like there are just things of like, sure, I know I'm going to get it, sounds kind of funny or kind of fun, but it's also like, I know it's Tim's film, but My Bodyguard's Wife or whatever it is, like that film too isn't Maverick, and isn't James Bond, and it isn't, I think Black Widow is going to be probably the first Marvel Universe film that's going to come out next couple of weeks. So I'm going to reserve like how bad it is, but maybe to your point, and maybe to our listeners' point is that we have to know that there isn't any argument that the viewing habits have changed and the theaters need to do something different.
Yeah, I mean that's really all I'm trying to say is I don't want this to become sort of like the loud Hosanna, everything's back to normal, we're doing great, people are coming back to the theater, but the core issues still exist. And I think that's what I'm worried is just going to get missed. You're right. It's Fast and Furious 9. It's the 9th, version of the series. Okay, there's probably going to be some semblance of franchise fatigue at this point. But at the same time, with Vin Diesel coming out said cinema's back, baby, and like all these hallelujah articles in Hollywood Reporter and Deadline and Variety. It's like the industry seems to be like, okay, we're getting back to normal. I'm like, but there's still fundamental issues that have to be addressed that no one, again, is really paying attention to. It's just like, okay, let's just get back to where we were pre-pandemic and then everything will be fine, and completely ignoring the fact that everything wasn't fine pre-pandemic. And as you pointed out, the OTT platforms are something that's going to have to be dealt with. We're going to have to figure out what that release schedule looks like. What does that mean for talent in terms of their deals? And theatrical needs to play a part in all this, obviously, but the experience itself still has to change in some fundamental way if you're going to convince people to, immediately snap back to the way things were pre-pandemic. Now, the evidence is showing that there are a lot of people that want to do that. Amusement parks are struggling to, deal with the sudden upshift in demand because everyone just wants to get outside and everybody just wants to go back to doing stuff that they used to do pre-pandemic. But the amusement parks you can't experience that in your house now. Like you can't do stuff like that in your house. But now there are films that you can watch in your house, and Netflix and all these OTT platforms are just going to start churning out more and more content. So in order to drive people to get out of their homes into the car and go to the theater, the experience has to be altered in some fundamental way to convince people to do just that.
So let's like create some kind of criteria then. Like, is it okay maybe for us to just change our scorecard and recognize that, the movie theater experience is just going to be different. And maybe the megaplex experience is the one that's going to be hurt, but the actual viewing experience is still going to be what it's going to be, and it maybe improve a little bit. I'm going to guess, the 4DX or whatever, those experiences where that almost turns the theater into a video game. I don't see those popping up everywhere, but possibly someone's doing something technology wise that will advance it.
Yep.
But if I were a storyteller today, where's the best place for me to make an investment with my story? Should I be making it for an OTT platform, or should I be making it for a theatrical experience? Because I almost feel like we want to pretend like the box office days, those blockbuster days that we've been accustomed to since the 1970s, honestly, where that we keep score by the opening weekend, is just not what's happening. Oh, here's an example. I just watched the premiere for, it was NBC Universal is releasing a film, and which one is it? They're releasing a film and on Peacock on the same day.
Oh yeah, Boss Baby 2.
And the commercial said in the theaters and on Peacock the same day.
Yeah,
they were proud to say it's on both instead of where we separated them.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that's maybe what we need to start becoming accustomed to is what that scorecard is of not just blockbuster numbers.
Yeah.
But some other way of talking about success.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a way to look at it. And, what I've sort of told some of my clients, I did a talk for the Greater Philadelphia Film Office 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. And it was a lot about all, emerging filmmakers trying to figure out how to get their movies and get their projects out there. And I said, listen, you have to do what your original vision of the project is. If you imagine it being a theatrical experience, there's a way to make that happen. There are a lot of independent theaters out there that are looking for projects or product. You can go to them and say, hey, I've got this film. Will you let me screen it? I'll bring my friends, they'll pay $10 or whatever. Well, that's money in the bank for the small indie theater. So you're right. I think the format of what we determine as success has to shift. And I think it's going to, and that's what you're going to see a lot of in terms of talent deals. Well, if you decide to shift this day and date onto an OTT platform, I want to make sure I'm compensated for that, as well as what goes on in the theater. And, we talked about this 2 weeks ago with some of the Disney talent, how they're feeling like, well, when I made this deal, I was under assumption this was going to have the Disney distribution machine behind it. It was going to be totally theatrical. And now you're doing day and date on your OTT platform. What the deuce? Whereas Universal, I think, because they shifted so early in the pandemic to OTT, when they pushed Trolls World Tour onto PVOD, and then this was prior to the launch of Peacock, I think that was sort of like, okay, when we were negotiating with Universal, we have to be under the understanding that it's probably going to go to a platform faster versus what it's traditional. So yes, the metrics of success have to shift, but it also involves, well, the OTT platforms also have to be more willing to share what that success is, because the thing that makes theatrical such a great barometer of success, it's hard to hide any of that numbers because everybody reports box office. But all the OTT platforms, as you and I had that exchange earlier this week on LinkedIn about the sort of secrecy behind all this, the platforms, and how they've trained all these stakeholders involved in the actual creation of the product that goes on the platform to just not worry about data. Just don't ask for it, don't demand it. Even like the investors aren't demanding it. As long as it looks like a success, that's all they care about.
Yeah.
So I think that is also going to have to shift as well, because if that's going to become a part of this new formula of success, then there has to be more transparency in terms of what's driving sort of the viewership numbers.
I guess, like, to me, we can go down this tangent a little bit, but it's really the creator then. If we don't know what the data is, the creator's not sharing in the success then.
Yeah.
And therefore, the filmmaker is just a commodity now. An OTT platform says, well, I paid you for it. Therefore, give me what I paid for. And I
go
own
away.
it and the rest is mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, filmmaking as a service is not really like at the genesis of what a lot of people's careers, like they actually got into it to have a dialogue and to create some notoriety, create some influence, and sharing the success. I mean, that's just it. But to kind of churn and burn through that process, I think that's a big trend in Hollywood that we kind of have to start addressing is where does the filmmaker go, or we'll say the entrepreneurial filmmaker go, if they want to take the winnings? Because what I've learned is a lot of people take the winnings to make the next film. Yeah. Like that's how you kind of build up your ability to have more and more flexibility, more and more creativity. And if we pull out that person's independence from doing it, then it doesn't play out. And investors that used to get backing from you, if they're not seeing data, if they're not sharing in the wins, what's the ROI for an investor?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. To me, like there's that item. The other concern I might have more in the theatrical space was it was always a place to have a dialogue with culture. You can bring up issues. There were divisive things. There's even divisive things in films. If I watch a film from 40 years ago, there are things being said that we wouldn't culturally say today. Yeah. And it's an open dialogue. And to me, that going into let's say like what happened within the Heights and some of the kickback that Lin-Manuel got, that to me is probably another bigger impact that I'm concerned about. So can I figure out the scorecard thing? Yeah, but can we get back to making films? I don't know. This is kind of a cultural moment. I don't know how to navigate through.
Yeah, I share your concern. I think, and we talked a little bit about this last week, with sort of the idea of the fear that's sort of dominating some of the places in Hollywood in terms of what you can and can't talk about. And as you said, the creative process relies so much on open dialogue. And Lin-Manuel, as you mentioned, got sort of pilfered on, social media, of course, because that's where all this happens usually. And he got pilfered for not, having accurate representation of darker skinned Puerto Ricans and Latinos in the Heights. And he immediately apologized and said, I'm learning, blah, blah, blah. And, Rita Moreno, who is one of these legendary Latino actresses, came out and said, you don't have to apologize. And then she got attacked. So then she backed down. And then Bill Maher, God bless him, comes out and says, why are you guys keep apologizing? Like, you don't have anything to apologize for. And this is sort of leading to this problem. And I read an article this week in New York Post by in the opinion pages by John Podorantz, who's a sort of a conservative commentator, and he said, like, well, we have West Side Story coming out in December from Steven Spielberg. He's going to get crucified. There's just no way that movie is going to go untouched in our current cultural moment. And it's just the lack of being able to have a dialogue or discuss it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with criticizing Lin-Manuel. That's, it's an artistic product. You can criticize it, but to criticize it to the point where you're trying to destroy him unless he apologizes, that's where things just start to get really out of control. And, with West Side Story, you've got a movie that was basically made by all white guys, right? Spielberg, Tony Kushner, white, the original liberists, the, composer, all white, so it's like, you're telling me that he's not going to get eviscerated in some way, shape, or form. But that's kind of the moment that we're in. And then you think also about Winston Marshall from, I know this is a little sidebar to what we normally talk about, but this sort of encapsulates the whole topic in which we're tackling. Winston Marshall from Mumford & Sons complimented Andy Ngo, who is a sort of reporter who has reported on Antifa in Portland, Oregon. He wrote an article about some of the things that have been happening there, or sorry, a book. And Winston complimented on him, because it's a dangerous place out there right now, and he's sort of in the heart of it. He's been attacked, he's been physically assaulted. So they were sort of complimenting him, or he was complimenting him, and they just went after the band to the point where he had to step away from the band because they were attacking the band members and their families. So then he's like, I got to step away. And now last week, he just announced, like, I'm stepping away from the band completely. Granted, he wrote a very thoughtful piece in terms of, like, listen, I cannot not be myself just to keep this job. Like, I feel like some part of me is dying inside because I can't honestly say I like this. I applaud him for writing this very brave book because of, all the things that are involved in putting that together. And it doesn't mean I'm like a far right supporter just because I support a book that sort of takes a look at the far left. So, and he's like, I can't be myself. And Bari Weiss has a new podcast, by the way. I recommend everyone listening, subscribe to it. She's great. She's a former New York Times columnist, also Pittsburgh girl, so I got to root for her. Go Steelers. But she has a podcast with him, which I haven't listened to yet. It's called Common Sense, and I'm sure it's great. And he really kind of dives in from the preview that she sent out in terms of why he really did this. But this is what's happening. Like this, we can't have a dialogue, and so much of the creative process and putting together great films relies on that process.
Well, I almost feel like we were dependent on films to create the dialogue. If you ask, like, there's so many great perspectives I've learned and considered because after a film I walked away with something and realized, oh, I was in the wrong, or I needed to understand this more, or maybe my understanding was too shallow going into it. And just exposure, I need exposure somehow, right? But so that filmmaker has to be able to express some sort of understanding where they're coming from independently. Otherwise, we're just basically asking for Fast and Furious 22, which has no cultural relevance to it or no dialogue to it, and not understanding the context that some of those conversations are taking place in. And the context is what's important.
Exactly.
And what we all know, and I don't think anyone's arguing, is that are there parts of our culture we need to address and have conversations about? Yes, but they need to be conversational. If they're only just in heightened arguments on one side of the line, and only one side can be correct, then we're all losing out. And I don't go to those films and learn that. If okay, well, it's not my side, I'm not gonna go watch a movie about someone else's opinion. I need to be able to get there. And I don't know how to, the thing you brought about West Side Story, that's an interesting one, because obviously there's some understanding like it's a classic, and there are really, the reason why it's a classic is that, again, it had a perspective that when you walked away from it, you would learn something else. I had an experience a few years ago at the Ashland Shakespeare Festival where I watched the Music Man, and the Music Man is like a silly musical, but the creator, the art director at that time did such an amazing job telling that story that I learned something else walking away from The Music Man. And I would hope that I can pull out a classic musical and have that same dialogue, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a recognition, excuse me, even from the original creators, that some of what was included in the original 60s musical isn't appropriate now because there's more understanding and more cultural sensitivity around certain things. But, you know, the original librettist, Arthur Lorenz, because there were two songs that sort of, you know, were heavy on the accents and broken English. And so in 2010, when he did a revival of West Side Story, he directed one at the age of 90, apparently, which is impressive in and of itself. He took two of the songs, A Boy Like That and I Feel Pretty, where it's sort of, they do speak a little bit of the broken English, and he rewrote them so that they were more sort of up to the times. And the person he hired to rewrite them and rework Spanish into the music was Lin-Manuel Miranda. So it's like, okay, so there's a recognition that, you know, we can evolve things here and there, but, and it's like, I go back to my original point, like you can critique him for, you know, if you felt that it wasn't a proper representation, that's fine. But why does he have to be destroyed for it? Like, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, we can have these conversations, and the storytelling genre, you know, going all the way back to The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, is just part of the human experience. If you read that book, it's all through every culture, the hero's journey and just storytelling in general and how it draws us all in. But if we can't have these sort of organic conversations and dialogues that allow us to experience it together as a human family, then it's just going to start to break down. And then, you know, you're right, we're going to get Fast and Furious 99 and The Purge Part 576, because that's the only thing that we can all sort of agree on at this point.
Yeah, which
is a problem. It's a serious problem. And when the escape, sort of the idea of the storytelling as an escape from sort of the day-to-day doldrums, if that becomes so controversial and just bland, then the industry is just going to start to break apart, and it's just not going to be the cultural touchdown that it has been for so many years.
We hold back the creative. We hold back the opportunity for those people that have a story to tell.
Yes.
And we miss perspectives, that things that we need to learn. I mean, where would conversion take place and new understanding take place if it's not giving a chance to hear the other side and understand something deeper? So exactly. All right, we only have 2 minutes, so here's my 2-minute question going into the 4th of July weekend.
Go.
What movie are you going to watch? What movie are you going to watch?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to try to watch The Tomorrow War, which is the new one on Amazon Prime with Chris Pratt. Big fan of Chris Pratt, so I'm interested to see what he does with this. It's really Amazon's first foray into sort of big budget action movie. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out over the long weekend. I'll be interested to see what the numbers look like, whatever numbers they end up. I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit for Amazon. And that's what they'll tell us on Tuesday. But that's the one I'm going to go for. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see because we have The Purge coming out. You got Fast and Furious 9 week 2. Quiet Place is still doing pretty decent business, and you got Boss Baby coming out as well, so on Peacock, as you mentioned, and in theaters. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But I'm probably going to check out The Tomorrow War because that kind of is right in my sweet spot. So
I have a feeling Tomorrow War is going to be the one that my family's going to choose also, like because I have teenage boys at home, so that's probably some reality. Although with the older boys hanging out, Seamus is joining us for the weekend. I might be able to convince him to go to Fast and Furious 9 with me to the theaters.
I hear it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, of course, that's why I want to go.
Yeah,
but if I was to be honest, like what I know is on 4th of July, because there's going to be all these families together, we're watching Boss Baby. I think that the original one cracked me up. It's a great one. So that's the one we're watching.
It'll get everybody to laugh. You know, who doesn't love a little baby that talks smack? I mean, come on. It's like the perfect way to spend your holiday weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Well, have a great 4th of July. Enjoy your barbecue ribs and corn on the cob.
Same. Happy Independence Day. Stay cool out there in the sweltering West.
Yeah, we'll try. Let's give thanks to Lydia behind the scenes, kind of pulling this together, and Connor for all your support that you keep us going, research, and those great things. And Keith, of course, to you and all your friends that give us these inside scoops and help us formulate this opinion. Couldn't do without our overall support. If you are listening and you like what you hear, please subscribe to our podcast wherever you're listening to it, or right here on YouTube. Have a great holiday weekend, everyone. Later, Keith.
See ya.